The main points today in discussion, we're again focusing on water. As we know, water shortages are common all over the country and in many regions of the world, based on climate change and the impacts of climate change in particularly arid regions. Water shortages will become increasingly common. Another important aspect of that and why water really ties into climate issues is that the energy used to produce, to withdraw water from the ground, distribute it, and then dispose and treat it results in a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. You'll see that abbreviated GHGs throughout the presentation. But water and energy are inextricably linked. And so conserving water in and outside the home is an easy way for us as Florida residents to kind of reduce some of those greenhouse gases and optimize our water supply. So looking at drought, it is, if you see this one, this is a map I pulled up last week. This group of federal agencies listed at the bottom works with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln to produce a daily drought monitor information map. You can see it was February 3rd, 2026 was released a few days after. So if you go to this website listed there, you can see the daily drought conditions in any given part of the country. You can also go there and get reports. You can pull maps. You can look at time-lapse changes throughout the country. At least as of last week, you can see North Central Florida was under extreme drought conditions where that red is. Also kind of the Tampa Bay area to the south. Interestingly, California had no drought issues. I was there about a month ago and it was rainy as could be in LA, which was really unusual for them, but they've kind of caught up on their rain. But again, just like climate science, drought is measured in long-term averages. It's not just what's happening on any given day, it's what's happening over months and years. And we know that climate change is changing those seasonal drought and rain patterns and intensifying them in some areas, and they're not so bad in others. One of the sort of aphorisms that I've learned as I've gotten more and more into climate science is that predictions are showing that wet places will get wetter and dry places will get drier. So those arid regions of our country and our planet where it's already drought prone are tending to get drier and less rain than they usually get, which means heat waves, which means drought, which means wildfires and that sort of thing. Wet places getting wetter, so the deep south where we are and the Gulf and Atlantic coast, we get a lot of rainfall, and so we are projected to get even more as time goes on. And talking about rain and climate, as you can see here, this is a typical map of the United States. I think it's our 30-year average with rainfall. That blue is where we're looking at anywhere from 50 to 70 inches of rain a year. The South, especially the Gulf South, is extremely wet. We get a lot of rain. We're one of the rainiest regions of the country. Besides, as you can see, the Pacific Northwest gets even more. But we get plenty of rain. And so drought, while we will struggle with it, and there are cycles throughout, it's usually water is our biggest climate-related problem. We've always gotten tropical storms and hurricanes. So that's part of the deal living here. But all the science I've seen, and the first time I really went to a climate meeting probably 15 years ago, what's borne out and what they said in that meeting and I've seen happen is that we won't have necessarily more hurricanes or more tropical storms than we already have, because we have a lot in the Atlantic and Gulf regions, but they'll be more intense. Instead of category 1 and 2 storms, we'll be getting more 4s and 5s, which we have seen in the last few years. Again, that brings in a lot of damage, a lot of impacts to these communities that are vulnerable. Again, our stormwater infrastructure is at this point often 40, 50 years old in a lot of places. Sometimes the storms wipe that out and you're forced to update it, as we had in Pensacola recently in the last 10 years. But also, as we get more rain, these pipes are undersized and we have to deal with that infrastructure, which is a lot of cost. but again, something important for dealing with the day-to-day. As we have rising seas as well, you've got a higher water level, so storm surge pushes inland further and faster. And you also have outfall pipes that are underwater in places. And so you get flooding on just what they call sunny day flooding, where you've got risen seas that are pushing water up into the cities. And so, again, as the climate warms and the atmosphere holds more moisture, we're going to continue to get more rain. And so that wet places getting wetter is something we will see quite often. Another thing that you can kind of look at is this NOAA chart of the billion-dollar weather and climate disasters. They've been keeping track of these for quite some time. This is the listing for 2024. You can see kind of the central part of the country has really been hit, but this goes, runs the gamut from winter storms to droughts and heat waves. Some pretty serious tornado outbreaks throughout the Midwest, and hurricanes and tropical storms along the Gulf and Atlantic areas. Again, these are billion-dollar damage incidents. And so not only is that personally devastating for the people who live in those communities, it interrupts school, it interrupts work, interrupts the day-to-day. And then you have, communities who are trying to recover. And as we have more people move into these vulnerable areas along the Florida coast or into regions that are growing and still hit by these storms, we have more impacts. So even if the storms weren't increasing in intensity or frequency, the more people you have and the more infrastructure and construction you have in those areas, the more vulnerable those communities are. The other impact, of course, is insurance companies. Probably many of us, including me, have been dropped by our homeowners insurance simply because we're in a hurricane-prone area. Again, that's extremely stressful for businesses and for private residents. We've had a lot of companies leave the state of Florida just because of the impacts, and so that is an ongoing issue that's not just going to be a Florida problem as time goes on. These insurance companies are taking on the risk of these storms, and as more risk comes in, some of them are less interested in taking that on. So moving on into water. Again, as we know, water is not free. It's a public resource, but getting access to it is not cheap. Again, we've got a rapidly growing population. As the economy improved, we had about 1,000 people a day moving to Florida. And our water resources kind of nationwide are declining. Now, if you look at this chart to the right, the American population is in the pink. It's been increasing steadily since the 50s. You can see in the dark blue, that's a total water use. And for the most part, it's been going up. Now, about 20 years ago, it started trending down, and a lot of that is due to efficiencies in technology, which is excellent. And again, something we want to continue to look at. But again, as our population increases, that's still going to be an issue as people try to balance that. This chart here on the left just sort of shows the sort of endless cycle as greenhouse gases emissions increase. We have increased climate change, which leads to more drought, floods, higher temperatures, which means more water demand and more energy use that just contributes to that cycle. So again, even as we become more efficient, our greenhouse gases are continuing to increase. Study from the Forest Service showed that in about 50 years, about half the freshwater basins in the U.S. wouldn't be able to meet the monthly demand. These large reservoirs evaporating and not being refilled. Many municipalities are dealing with water use restrictions. In Northwest Florida, we haven't had so many, but definitely put in the chat if you're having to deal with restrictions from your local municipality. We'll kind of talk about that a little bit later in the presentation about some of the ones that are in place from the St. Johns River Water Management District and how they manage that public resource. Here, I just wanted to show you the water resource that most of us are on. The Floridan aquifer is one of the most productive systems in the world. It's deep underground and it moves up into Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina. It's 100,000 square miles that it covers and provides 11 million people with drinking water. Now, of course, the Panhandle being a little different on everything. Those 4 or 5 Northwest counties you can see are not part of this aquifer. We're on something called the sand and gravel aquifer that is more shallow. It's more easily refilled because it's not as deep, but it's also more easily polluted because it's not as got as much depth. And so, again, this is our drinking water source. It's incredibly important that this gets recharged and protected as more people move in. And speaking of those people, this is our projected land use change from 2010 to 2070. You can see when this was first produced on the left, the 2010 baseline, we had about 18 million people living in Florida. Those red marks on the map show the urban centers where you've got a more highly developed region, certainly on the coast and the Panhandle and, Escambia, Santa Rosa County over toward Panama City, on the Gulf and Atlantic coastlines, of course, the Orlando area. The deeper green is the protected areas, which we've done a pretty decent job at. Up in the Panhandle, we've got Eglin Air Force Base and Blackwater River State Forest, the Apalachicola watershed, and then down south, you've got the Everglades, of course, that's protected. But as you look to the right, this prediction of 34 million people, you can see the intensity of that red development area. Again, that's going to, any new development, any new business, any new group of people coming in, they're all going to need water. They're all going to need energy. That's more schools, that's more businesses, that's more transportation. And so we've got to figure out how to adapt. We're not going to get any more water to use, but we've got to share it with everybody else in this doubling of the population. And I looked in to see what our current population is. Here in 2026, as of 2025, it's about 23 million people. So that's a 5 million person increase from just 15 years ago. At that rate, we're going to be way beyond 34 million people in 2070. I think in 2010, they couldn't have predicted the number of people who would start moving to Florida during and after the COVID epidemic, where people realized it was a lower cost of living in Florida and they could work virtually and live, do whatever job they wanted from a cheaper place. And so our population may be beyond this 34 million prediction. And so there's energy uses that all these folks and us are using. It's about 1,000 gallons a person per day for our household electricity. Half of that is food production. That's averaging out the amount of water used to irrigate crops and provide for livestock. Another 400 to produce that electricity that we use every day. And then 100 gallons for direct household use. So it's individually, we don't produce quite as much. But if we look here at the breakdown, each of us typically using about 80 to 100 gallons. Quarter of that is just flushing toilets. Washing clothes is another quarter. Then showers and faucets contributing a good bit. Again, all of these can be mitigated by having low flow toilets, doing full loads of clothes, taking shorter showers, having low flow shower heads, that sort of thing. There are ways to reduce the amount of water that we use, but it's good to kind of see a visual of how that's broken down. Now, I mentioned the watering restrictions that a lot of communities have. This one is just an example from St. Johns River. Again, if y'all live in this area, let us know what this is like. Again, we don't have a lot of specific restrictions in the Panhandle, but you can see here during daylight savings time, which is from March to early November. So not quite in that now, but or I guess right now in from November to March, You're looking at 1 day a week of watering. It's based on home address. So if it's an odd or an even number on the house, so that's how they monitor it. Again, I would imagine neighbors keep an eye on each other. Even if they don't have people out, I'm sure there are folks ratting on each other that, hey, so and so at 2400 is watering, and it's a, you know, it's a Saturday and they're not supposed to be watering. So again, there's a lot of rules on this. No more than 1 hour per zone, not after 10 a.m. or before 4 p.m. The best recommendations for watering is to do it in the morning when there's already dew on the grass. It's more efficient before the wind picks up and evaporates that irrigation water. So again, this is just one example of watering restrictions and how they're trying to handle that balance between human use and the supply. So looking at total consumption in Florida, the largest, at least 10 years ago, the largest use was agriculture, that dark blue. But if you look at the light blue, the public supply, that's us, that's increased. It's switched from ag to public water consumption is the larger percentage. That may be agricultural water use efficiencies. It may be increase in population, probably a little bit of both. Then those smaller percentages are landscape and recreation, so watering ball fields, commercial supply, and power, and then domestic. So individual wells are that smallest percentage. And this data is from about 6 years ago, so it's probably different now. Some of the information just on how you can balance this. Again, we've got a lot of tips we'll talk about, but the St. John's Water Management District talks about using smart irrigation technology. I'll go through their home water use survey website, but then you can also look at wastewater and water reuse. A lot of communities will reuse either stormwater or wastewater, treated wastewater as irrigation in large scale areas. Some homes are able to use their plumbing in a way that shower water goes into flushing toilets or into irrigation. Now there are some complications sometimes with using wastewater for irrigation because of the nutrient levels can be hard to manage. But again, being able to reuse that water is ideal if you can. Water for energy and energy for water. There's this term water energy nexus because they're so inextricably linked. This term exists. You have to have water to generate energy. In that blue section of the circle there, you need water to extract and refine your power. You need it if you're doing hydro electric power, if you're doing thermoelectric cooling, producing fuel, you need water to create that energy. But also, you need a lot of energy to extract and transmit the water, to distribute it out to all the homes and businesses, to treat drinking water, and to use it to run all of those appliances that need water, and then to treat it. Wastewater treatment, of course, uses a good bit of energy as well. So again, that cycle just sort of continues. There's another sort of illustration of how these water sources are used. You have to, pull it up, and then you use it in a number of different ways for homes and business and that sort of thing. You withdraw it from the source, and then it's consumed when it's, kind of polluted in the process, and you can't immediately use it right away again. Some of the largest withdrawals are for thermoelectric power and for irrigation. And as far as freshwater is concerned, we use 81% of it for irrigation. So that can really be something that we have an impact on, especially as homeowners. If you've got irrigation systems, there are a lot of really efficient ways to irrigate. I can talk more about that when I do the Florida Friendly Landscaping talk in a few weeks. But the frequency at which you water, the type of irrigation, if it's applied directly to the root zone, if it's looking at satellite telemetry and weather-based irrigation. There are soil moisture sensors that are very, very accurate. And so depending on the type of irrigation you use, you can reduce your water bill a lot too. Several studies have shown that in the summertime for a typical Florida home that's irrigating, that's about half your water bill is just from irrigation. Then, of course, there's, kind of the battles over private use of the public resources. Just a few years ago, there was a big battle over the use of Jenny Springs for a bottled water operation. They wanted to pull 1 million gallons a day out of this, pristine spring that's a huge tourist destination for those in the Swanee River area. And they got something like 19,000 public comments on this. This really got people fired up. And you can imagine, is a private company going to take as good a care of the spring as the local residents? How do you value that water? It brings up a lot of complicated issues. And again, bottling water is not a particularly sustainable practice as it is. You need 3 liters of water to produce a single liter of bottled water. So that again, the energy and the water that it takes to create more bottled water, not to mention the plastic container that it's in. Again, it's the best practice to use a refillable water bottle. And, if you're concerned about your tap water quality, use a filter device. A lot of folks in the public sphere are putting water bottle refillers and water fountains in public spaces so that people can do that and not feel obligated to purchase water. And of course, it's important to recycle it. One of my first positions as in environmental field was working for the State Department of Environmental Protection, and I worked in the drinking water section. And our job was to monitor all of the different wells, private and public, that provided drinking water for the whole sort of Northwest Florida community, and as well as look at reports on where they were with pollutant levels. Are they under the standards? Are they over the standards? And I'll tell you that every single person who worked in that section with me drank tap water. People were like, you don't know what's in the tap water. Well, the reality is you don't really know what's in your bottled water because it's not regulated the same way as tap. So again, all those folks who did the regulating drank straight from the tap. Now, one of the issues is kind of an emerging thing that when we first started doing Climate Smart Floridians, we didn't really talk about this, but these AI data centers use a ton of energy and water. Florida's got 120 of these. This is what they look like. They just are kind of big warehouses. We're the 4th largest number of these centers in the country. I'm sure there are more under construction. Not only are they using water and energy here, but they also, you can see the footprint of this thing. It's quite a big pad. So you've got an impervious surface where you're going to be generating stormwater. So the typical cloud storage data centers can pull as much electricity as 10 to 25,000 households. So, kind of a small town. This is the data centers that handle our, the iCloud that you use for your smartphones, or the OneDrive that we use for UF. So kind of the typical computer use. But as the advent of AI, where they are using much more data and it's much more intense, these hyperscale centers use 10 times as much energy to operate. So the equivalent of 100,000 homes for one of these AI-focused data centers that they're building. So that's a pretty good size city. One of the stats I saw was this new data center they're building in Louisiana is going to require twice the power of the city of New Orleans. That's one of those cities that goes on and on all year long. And so you can imagine the amount of energy used for those. And so that's a big draw on the local infrastructure. Are these communities ready for that? There are some jobs associated with these data centers, but not a lot. They're pretty automated. But again, these things, if you've ever dealt with computer, centers, they heat up all that electricity generates heat, and so they use water to cool it. One of the collective data centers in Texas use about 50 billion gallons of water per year for cooling. So again, this is another whole area. I'm sure if you've been on social media in the last week, people are, ragging each other about those AI generated cartoon profile pictures. How many gallons of water did those use? But again, it's worth thinking about. Again, they'll probably start using AI to become more efficient in the amount of energy and water they use, but whether we can keep up with that is another story. Looking at other uses of energy and water in the community, wastewater treatment. Septic tanks again are going to be less energy and greenhouse gas intensive because it's hyper local. It's just treating the water right there on site. But it's a pollution issue. Particularly in coastal areas around our bayous, we have a lot of water quality issues related to septic bacteria issues. But sewer, of course, accounts for a good bit of our energy use in the whole country. It's better on pollution. It's more contained and you're treating it. But you've got to, again, pull all that wastewater from all these individual homes and distribute it and send it out to a wastewater treatment facility. And those are not, all wastewater treatment plants are not created equally either. Here in Escambia County, we had a very old wastewater treatment plant for a long time. It was located downtown because it was close to the bay and it was just sort of gravity fed. But when Hurricane Ivan hit in 2004, it overwhelmed the wastewater treatment facility. We had raw sewage in the streets. And so thankfully, FEMA was able to come in and help provide some money. And so we were able to build an advanced wastewater treatment plant 10 miles inland, which had a lot of kind of downstream effects. Besides more effectively treating the community's wastewater, it used to smell downtown because you had this wastewater treatment center right in the middle of our kind of more urban core where our businesses and our kind of tourism focused. My kids used to call it the poop factory. It smelled so bad down there. And so when you got rid of that smell downtown where you have all of these people, it ended up being a boom for the restaurants and the shops down in the city center because suddenly people could be outside, they could eat outdoors because you didn't have a bad smell. So you never know what the kind of ongoing effects are when you do something thankfully productive. Moving into, again, we talked a little bit about outdoor water use and irrigation already, but according to the EPA, we use about 9 billion gallons a year of outdoor water. What is this water used for? Well, you can imagine it's for our lawn addiction. I know my organization does a lot with lawn care and it's kind of known for that horticulture aspect, but we use a lot of water to irrigate our lawns. And so reducing that or being more efficient with it, a lot of times people don't have to apply nearly the water that they think they need for a landscape. And you can also adjust what you plant and how you use that water to be more efficient. Not only does it save the water resource, but it also saves a lot of money. In a couple weeks, I'll spend the entire session on Florida-friendly landscaping. This is a program that was developed about 20 years ago by UF-IFAS Extension to work with homeowners and also with developers and other folks in the landscape industry to reduce the amount of pollutants and the amount of irrigation used on lawns. And so we'll talk about that more in depth. There's a lot of resources online if you're interested in that Florida-friendly landscaping aspect. Some low-cost solutions. The idea behind this class is to give you ways that you can contribute positively to the issues we have. Of course, installing low-flow showers and toilets, devices like that, reusing potable water when you can, turning off water when the sink is running, brushing teeth, washing dishes. Dishwashers, especially full load, are more efficient. Using just a broom to sweep off your gutters and your porches instead of running hose water at it. Washing cars at commercial car washes, these are more efficient than homeowners doing it themselves. And then using a rain barrel. I'll talk more about rainwater harvesting during our Florida Friendly Landscaping session, but collecting that rainwater to use for watering plants on a sunny day, um, for cleaning outdoor tools, washing dogs, that kind of thing, can be a great way to contribute. Um, my colleagues and I also work a lot with the development industry, with stormwater engineers and builders about how to develop our communities in a more sustainable way. So things like conserving green space, doing more clustered development instead of spreading it everywhere out. Um, our native soils can absorb runoff more efficiently and treat it. And this also helps with a lot of our, carbon absorption, that sort of thing. So conserving that green space, using permeable pavement. This is instead of hard pavement where everything just runs off, you actually absorb it through kind of pore space in that somewhat permeable surface, and allow it to infiltrate and get treated in the soils below. Um, Using green roofs. We only have a few of these, really, but they are basically a rooftop, typically flat, that's covered in vegetation, some sort that absorbs runoff, prevents stormwater from being created. It also cools the rooftop and the building below it. We have one of the largest green roofs in the country, or in the state, in Escambia County. And that building, the temperatures and the energy needed to heat and cool it is much less because of the shade that's already there. And the bottom right, bioretention basins or rain gardens. These are basically miniature stormwater ponds that sort of collect rainwater and treat it. It's also kind of aesthetically pleasing because it's a vegetated area that is not just a kind of open stormwater pond. Again, things you can do, we talked about already is, pay attention to the weather and irrigate as needed. You don't have to water every day just because, your system is set that way. You can have it account for the soil moisture and the rainfall, and applying it at the roots so you don't have a lot of evaporation. Again, turning off the tap and using efficient appliances, including Energy Star. This program was threatened this year with being cut, but there was strong bipartisan support. The program was saved, and there was even more funding dedicated to it just earlier this month. Records are showing since 1992, when the Energy Star program was created, we've saved $500 billion in energy costs. And again, you've probably seen this if you've been to any appliance store, or you bought anything. Anything that uses energy and water, like washers and dryers, dishwashers, water heaters, if they've got this Energy Star logo, they've been vetted by the EPA and Department of Energy to be more efficient and save you money and water. I wanted to show y'all this. I'm gonna move out of this real just briefly and show you this site. We'll send you the links to some of these things that I've mentioned, but this is a pretty cool little interactive site with the St. Johns River Water Management District. It shows you this, floor plan of a home and all these little dots where you can look. And so you can click on any of these. Here's a washing machine. And it gives you some information, right? So a non-conserving washing machine can use 30 gallons of water a load, get a high efficient model, Energy Star, ideally. So imagine you do 4 loads of laundry per week. It's showing that an older one would use 23 gallons. But if you have an Energy Star, you're using 10 gallons of water. So again, this is just a way to sort of look at the different ways you can use it. Here's a tub. Um, we're talking about using it for a bath, or you can look at the shower as well and how much water, um, depending on the gallons per minute and your shower head level. You know, how long you take a shower, of course, will make a difference. Uh, some of the water conservation tips, we'll get into those again in a couple of weeks. But you know, the way you care for a lawn affects the water that you use. You know, you don't have to cut it as long. Taller grass is more drought resistant, and so cutting it less frequently and allowing it to get a little taller actually is better. And also keep it having a sharp mower blade. If you have dull blades, it kind of tears the grass, and then it's weaker and more vulnerable to disease, and you'll end up needing more fertilizer, water, whatever to fix what's going on. So again, this is a nifty little activity, you know, something you can use yourself or with family to kind of show, you know, why you're harping on, you know, using the washer and the dryers and other appliances uh, the way you know, ideally want to. Um, so with that, I will go to questions. I've seen, okay, looking down
Yeah,
at
I
the,
got a couple of comments in the chat, Carrie.
okay,
Um, so Callie mentioned that they're seeing increased restrictions in the Tampa Bay area, and
mhm.
I too have been seeing that in South Florida, in particular the past week or so. And then Catherine said she thinks it would be a good idea in Pasco County to have a building moratorium until the homes that are recently built or are on the market are inhabited. So I didn't
Yeah, I
know.
mean, it makes sense to, you know, infill the available real estate before you continue adding more, right? I mean, that feels like a logical decision. I don't know politically where that is, right? Often home builders have the ear of a lot of commissioners. But yeah, I agree. There ought to be some sort of, you know, you could have a local ordinance where, you know, unless you've got 70 or 80%, you know, occupancy, then you need to hold off on building. Again, that maybe that's my dream world, but maybe that exists in some places. That makes a lot of sense.
And then
Um,
we're a smaller group, so if anybody'd like to just unmute and ask a question, we'll leave that open for a minute or two here.
it's interesting, y'all were seeing the Tampa Bay with increased restrictions because that drought map that that I showed earlier in the presentation showed that y'all are under severe drought conditions, you know, and so until that's relieved, um, I feel like that's probably going to continue to require more water use restrictions.
I know Carrie's mentioned it, that we have three more lunch and learn presentations. So next Tuesday, same time, we'll be talking about food, which is a super interesting one. There's a lot to learn around climate change and the food system, and really thinking about you know, different aspects of that. And then Carrie mentioned she'll be doing the following Tuesday, the Florida Friendly Landscaping, which is always, you know, really interesting. You know, we all have landscapes, or most of us have landscapes or areas that we have an interest in. And then the final one is deals with consumption, and it's usually genders a lot of discussion. So we'd invite you to come hang out with us while we talk about that. I am going to put up a quick poll if you don't mind answering that, and then we can wrap this up. the poll really helps us understand if we're hitting the mark in terms of, giving you information you can use, and, it helps us sort of define these programs.
We'll send out the link to this recording in a day or two, along with the links to some of the more useful resources. We really appreciate y'all taking your time to be part of this program. We've done these in different regions throughout the years, but every now and then we try to do a statewide one, and it's nice to see the perspectives and the issues that everybody's dealing with in different parts of the state.
Yep, and I will add, we did record the previous ones, so if you've missed one, you'll get a link to find the other ones as well if you'd like to go back and watch. And as you're finishing up the poll, I also want to say thank you. We appreciate your attention, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you again. If you happen to be with an organization or a city government or something like that, and you want to offer this program locally, either in person or online, feel free to reach out to us. We also do a train the trainers training. It's a lot of train the trainer training, but yes, we do that as well, and we're happy to help you bring this type of program locally to your community. And with that, I think we were going to end the poll and wish you a good day.
Thank y'all so much. Appreciate it.
Carrie, do you know the poll questions get saved then to Holly's or yours or somebody's?
I hope so. I presume somebody.
I mean, I can share them real quick. I can't like highlight them, but yeah, she's been getting them somehow. So, all right, I will stop sharing. We can stop recording.